That who travels in this country has stories of planes that just made it. So, it comes as perhaps no surprise that a global flight safety survey ranks Russia even lower than Congo and Indonesia. This follows 9 fatal crash tragedies in 2011 alone.
Primetime's Lindsay France is following the story. Lindsay, as they say, this is not for nothing, is it?
Absolutely not. You have only to look at the numbers of people who have actually lost their lives in domestic crashes in the last year to understand why such a harsh assessment was made. Let's look at 8 of these here. We start almost 1 year ago to the day, December 4th, 2010, when 2 of 3 engines on a Dagestan Airlines Tupolev 154 failed after takeoff from Moscow when the crew forgot to turn on a fuel pump. 2 people died then. Then we jump to January 1st, 2011. Electrical equipment caught fire, killing 3 and injuring 43. March 5th, 2011. On a passenger jet in the Volgograd region, it crashed, killing 6 people. June 20th, we have our first major big fatality crash of the year when at the Petrozavodsk airport on a rainy night when 47 people were killed when the plane crashed there. Then July 11th, 2011, an engine fire caused a plane to crash into the Ob River in Siberia, killing 7, injuring 28. A cargo plane on August 9th crashed in the Magadan region, killing 11. August 22nd, we've got a crash in the Tuva region, killing 1 and injuring 7. And then, of course, how could anyone ever forget September 7th, 2011, when the Russian pro hockey team, Lokomotiv, was virtually the entire team was killed. 45 people lost their lives when that plane crash landed, when some pilots inadvertently hit the brakes on takeoff for that flight. Now, it must be said that most of these airplanes were Soviet-era planes, but many safety experts and even government officials will point out that the cause of most of these crashes wasn't equipment failure. It was poorly trained pilots, and many of them not following modern safety procedures. There were many gross violations and errors that occurred in all of these flights. Some of them included drunken, sedated flight crews, hastily trained pilots, even forged safety documents. In one crash, the navigator actually used wrong guidance equipment and aimed his jetliner at a tree off the runway. There are many companies in Russia who will not even fly their employees to distant oil fields using domestic airlines. They fly them out of the country, then back in using an international carrier. Now, one particular crash, the June 20th crash, killing 47 people, all 7 crew members on the mandatory health checks when those people enter the plane were found to have recorded identical pulses. And the navigator in that flight, when his blood alcohol level was tested in his autopsy, it was 0.081%. That is above the alcohol level to drive a car in Russia. So there are many, many problems with following safety procedures here for these domestic flights. And unfortunately, we've seen it in a number of horrible fatalities this year.
Yeah, Lindsay, the figures that we saw on those graphics are pretty self-explanatory. In fact, at one point it seemed as though the tragedies were coming every few weeks with regularity. What have Russian aviation experts had to say by way of explanation?
Well, the experts reject the comparison to the less developed countries. They say it's not objective, that's not a fair assessment. They think that stricter regulations and tighter control on inspections and equipment will solve the problem, as well as more and better training for pilots. We spoke with one expert today, and he shed some light for us on some of the reasons that this past year has been so tragic in his view.
70% of air crashes that took place in 2010 were caused by human error. In recent years, the quality of training has dropped, as well as the equipment they are training on. Next, almost all these crashes involved Soviet-made aircraft, which were very old. And finally, remember the Petrozavodsk crash in June? That airport wasn't ready to accept such a plane.
Just 2 years ago, Russia appeared to be very, very safe aviation-wise for these domestic flights. In 2006, it accepted international help with its major air carriers, Aeroflot and Trans-Aero, and by 2009 there were no fatalities. Since then, these tragedies have spiked with these domestic airlines that are under-regulated, and because the international requirements and Russian requirements are not matching up on how stringent they need to be with not only the equipment that's hitting the air, but the people who are manning that equipment that's taking people on these flights.
Lindsay, what improvements being made, if any? Can we possibly expect fewer tragedies in the foreseeable future?
Well, as far as athletes are concerned, they can look forward to safer flights. The KHL is signing on to employ a large, reputable carrier to take care of all team flights to games across the country. So that gets the athletes covered, but what about the rest of us? As soon as the investigations started surfacing the facts following that last major crash back in September that killed the hockey team, President Medvedev came out and did demand many very tough rules to be used against small airlines that were not following the safety rules. In November, crash investigators from the Interstate Aviation Committee actually called on Moscow to accelerate international safety rules domestically, saying that there should not be a gap in this compliance. President Medvedev himself requested legislation to strengthen state supervision of airlines, increasing fines, and allowing for some of these airlines to be shut down when they're not complying with safety standards without relying on courts to carry that out. A lot of that language is still being dealt with regarding these new laws. He also demanded the quicker installment of terrain and collision avoidance systems to be sped up in accordance with international standards. And of course, a quarter of these Soviet aircraft that were being used for many of these domestic flights have since been grounded. So many actions have been taken, but I think the international community, from what the experts are saying, feels that there is a certain laxness, a laziness on the part of these domestic companies in regulating the level of personal responsibility that these flight crews feel when they enter that cockpit, on being sure that they're healthy, they haven't ingested any alcohol or drugs, and that they're properly trained.
Okay, certainly room for improvement there. We're just talking about the poor safety record of Russia's aviation industry, as explained by Lindsay France there.